She said it like she was reading from a grocery list. "Mom, we really think it's time you looked into independent living." I was standing at the kitchen counter cutting tomatoes for dinner, my daughter's dinner, in my apartment. And I kept cutting because I didn't trust myself to put down that knife and respond calmly. Independent living. That's what they call it now. It used to be called a nursing home. But someone in marketing got clever. "I'll think about it," I said. And I did think about it. I thought about it all night long. My name isn't important. What matters is this: I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching 8th grade English at Millbrook Middle School. I raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband passed in 2009. I paid off this apartment, every single dollar, with my teacher's salary and the small inheritance my mother left me. My name is on the deed. Only my name. And somehow, in the span of 18 months, I had become a guest in my own home. It started innocently enough. My daughter called me in the spring of 2022, her voice bright and careful the way it gets when she wants something. She and her husband were having trouble with their landlord. "Mold in the walls," she said. The baby was coming in 4 months and they couldn't stay there. "Just until we find something," she said. "A few months, tops." I said yes before she finished the sentence. Of course I did. She was my daughter and she was pregnant and she needed me. I cleared out my sewing room, bought a new mattress for the guest bed, moved all my craft supplies into the hall closet. I made space for them the way I'd spent my whole life making space for other people. My granddaughter was born in August. Hazel, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with her grandfather's ears and her mother's stubborn mouth. I was there in the waiting room when she arrived, and I cried so hard. A nurse came over to check on me. Those first months were good. Really good. The apartment felt full in the way it hadn't since my kids were young. I cooked dinners. I watched Hazel on Tuesday mornings so my daughter could go to her yoga class. My son-in-law and I watched football on Sundays. We weren't a perfect arrangement, but we were family. I don't know exactly when it shifted. It wasn't one moment. It was a slow tilting, like a picture frame that moves a little each week until one day you look up and it's completely crooked and you don't remember it happening. By winter, my son-in-law had taken over the second bathroom as his home office. That was fine. He worked remotely. I understood. But then his monitors appeared in the living room, then his filing boxes in the hallway, then a second mini fridge in the kitchen because he liked his drinks at a specific temperature. One morning I went to make coffee and found my coffee maker had been moved to the top shelf. I'm 5'3" and replaced on the counter with one of those expensive pod machines that neither of them had mentioned buying. I moved my coffee maker back down that afternoon. No one said anything, but I noticed my son-in-law's jaw tighten at dinner. Small things. Individually, nothing. Together, a pattern. My daughter started making comments about the decor. Nothing cruel, always framed as suggestions. "You know what would look great here, Mom, if we painted this wall a darker color." Or, "That bookshelf is kind of taking up a lot of space, don't you think?" The bookshelf she was referring to held my late husband's collection, 30 years of novels, histories, atlases. He read every one of them. I used to dust them on Saturday mornings and feel like I was still in the same room as him. I didn't paint the wall. I didn't move the bookshelf. Spring came. They were still there. The few months had become nearly a year. I didn't bring it up, because bringing it up felt like choosing confrontation over family, and I was not raised to do that. My mother used to say, "Keep the peace first, keep the score, never." So I kept the peace. Then one Sunday in April, my daughter sat down across from me at the kitchen table. My son-in-law was in the living room. I could see him from where I sat. He didn't look up from his phone, but I had the feeling he was listening very carefully. "Mom," she said, "we've been talking." I set down my tea. This apartment is really only meant for one person, and with Hazel growing up, she needs a real room, not a corner of ours. "We've been thinking about the future, your future too." She said it with so much gentle concern in her voice that for a moment I almost felt grateful, like she was doing me a favor. "There's a place over in Clover Hills. Really beautiful, actually. Activities, medical staff on site. You'd have your own room, your own bathroom. People your age to spend time with. People your age. I picked up my tea again. My hand was steady. I was proud of that. I'll think about it, I said. That night I sat in my bedroom, the bedroom I had slept in for 22 years, the room where I had read every book on that shelf out there, the room where I had held my husband's hand during his last weeks, and I thought about what my daughter had actually said to me. She hadn't asked. She had informed. She and her husband had made a decision about my life, for my life, and they had presented it to me as a kindness, a plan, a favor. I sat there for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. I want to be clear about something. I did not act out of anger. By the time I started making phone calls, the anger had already passed through me and left something quieter behind. Clarity, maybe, or just the specific resolve that comes when you've been patient for a very long time and you finally understand that patience is no longer serving you. The first call I made was to my financial advisor, a woman named, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that she'd managed my accounts for 11 years, and she knew my situation better than anyone. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. "You own the apartment outright," she said. "Yes." "And your name is the only name on the deed." "Yes." Another pause. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said, "that I'd like to understand all my options." The second call I made was to a real estate attorney. Not to list the apartment. Not yet. Just to understand the process, how long it takes, what the steps are, what my obligations would be to current residents given that no one had a formal lease. They didn't. I had never thought to ask for one. Another thing I'd done out of trust. The attorney was very clear. As the sole owner with no formal rental agreement in place, I had significant flexibility. She walked me through the timeline. I asked questions. I took notes in the small green notebook I keep by the phone. That night I slept better than I had in months. I didn't say a word to my daughter. I smiled at breakfast. I played with Hazel on the living room floor. When my son-in-law asked if I'd thought more about Clover Hills, I said I was still considering it, and I asked him to please pass the orange juice. Over the following 2 weeks, I did 3 things. First, I met with a real estate agent. She walked through the apartment on a Wednesday morning while my daughter was at work and my son-in-law was in his office with the door closed. She took photographs. She gave me a market estimate that made me sit down. The apartment had appreciated significantly, more than I'd realized. Second, I found my new place. I hadn't been looking long when I saw it. A 1-bedroom condo in a building about 20 minutes away on the 4th floor with windows that faced east. Morning light, a small balcony where I could keep planters, a reading nook built into the wall of the bedroom that made my heart do something I hadn't felt in years. It was smaller than my apartment, but it was exactly right. Exactly mine. Third, I called my son. He lives in Portland and we talk every Sunday. I told him everything, the dinner conversation, the Clover Hills suggestion, what I was planning. He was quiet for a long time. "Mom," he finally said, "are you sure?" "I'm completely sure." "Does she know?" "Not yet." Another silence. "Is there anything I can do?" "Keep this between us for now," I said, "and maybe plan a visit sometime in the fall. I'll have a guest room by then." He laughed a little, the kind of laugh that has some pain in it. "Okay, Mom. I love you," I said. "I love you too." "And Mom, I love you too." "And Mom, good for you." I accepted an offer on the apartment 11 days later. I didn't tell my daughter. I know how that sounds. I've turned it over in my mind many times since. But here is what I keep coming back to. She didn't tell me when she made her decision either. She and her husband had discussed my future, planned my future, decided on my future, and then they presented it to me as a done thing, a kindness, a suggestion that was really a conclusion. So yes, I made my own conclusion, and I kept it to myself for the same reason she had, because some decisions don't require anyone else's permission. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday. My daughter worked Thursdays. My son-in-law had a standing video call in the morning that kept him locked in the office for at least 3 hours. I was dressed by 7:30. I wore the blue blazer I bought for my retirement party. I put on the pearl earrings my husband gave me for our 25th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, you look like a woman who knows exactly what she's doing. The closing took 2 hours. I signed my name more times than I could count. The attorney across the table, not my attorney, the buyer's, kept glancing at me in a way that made me think he expected me to change my mind. I didn't change my mind. When I walked out of the office, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the November air. My phone had 3 unread messages from my daughter, things about groceries, something about Hazel's pediatrician appointment. Normal things. Life continuing as usual things. I read them and typed back cheerful responses and dropped my phone in my purse and got in my car. I had arranged the movers for the following Saturday, when I knew my daughter would be taking Hazel to her music class and my son-in-law would be at the gym. I had been quietly, methodically moving my most important things over the preceding weeks: the green notebook, my husband's books, the photograph albums, the jewelry box, the teaching awards I kept in the closet. Small loads, a few boxes at a time, in the evenings after everyone was asleep or on mornings when the apartment was empty. The movers handled the furniture. It took 4 hours. I left the pod coffee machine. I left the filing boxes in the hallway. I left everything they had brought into the space, and I took everything that was mine. And when the last box was loaded and the door was locked and my key was in my pocket, I stood in the empty entryway one last time. 22 years. I had hung my coat on that hook since before my children were fully grown. I had celebrated holidays in this space and grieved in it and laughed in it and been lonelier than I'd ever told anyone in it. My husband had read in that living room every single evening. My granddaughter had taken her first steps on that kitchen floor. I said goodbye to it quietly, the way you say goodbye to something when you're the only one who knows you're leaving. Then I pulled the door shut and I went to my new home. My daughter called that evening. I was sitting on the floor of my new condo. The movers had placed the furniture, but I hadn't arranged anything yet, eating a sandwich I'd picked up on the way, looking out the east-facing windows at the darkening sky. My phone lit up, her name on the screen. I let it ring twice. Then I answered, "Mom." Her voice was strange, tight. "Where are you?" "I'm at my new place," I said. Silence. "What new place? What are you talking about?" "I came home and everything is—" "Mom, where is all your stuff?" "I sold the apartment," I said. The closing was Thursday. The silence this time was longer. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. "You? What? You sold it? Without telling us? Where are we supposed to go?" I took a breath. I had rehearsed this. Not the words exactly, but the steadiness, the tone. "You and your husband are capable adults," I said. "You'll find something. You have resources I didn't have at your age. And you have time. The buyer doesn't take possession for 60 days, so you have 2 months to make arrangements." 2 months. "Mom, we have a baby. You can't just—" "You asked me to leave," I said quietly. "You sat across from me at my own kitchen table and suggested I go live somewhere with medical staff and people my age. You made a decision about my life and you presented it to me as a kindness. I made a decision about my life, too. I'm just being honest about what it is." She didn't say anything for a long moment. We weren't trying to push you out. We just thought— "I know what you thought," I said. "I've thought about it quite a bit. Where are you? Can I come see you?" "Not tonight," I said. "I need to settle in." I could hear her breathing. "Then, are you okay?" It was the first time in a long time she had asked me that. Not about my schedule, not about my schedule, not about my space, not about my plans for my own living situation. Just, "Are you okay?" "I'm better than I've been in months," I said, and I meant it. We said goodnight. I sat there in the half-dark with my sandwich and my east-facing windows and the specific silence of a space that belongs entirely to you. And I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was called. Peace. Just peace. That was 8 months ago. My daughter and I talk on the phone every week. It took time, real time, not the polite surface kind, for things between us to find a new shape. There were harder conversations after that first night, things said and heard that needed to be said and heard. My son-in-law apologized to me directly, which I did not expect and which meant more than I showed. They found an apartment, a real one, in their names, with a lease that they signed themselves. Hazel has a proper room now, with yellow walls and a mobile of wooden birds hanging over her crib. I've seen it in the photos. My son came to visit in October. He slept in my guest room, the one I put together with a new quilt and a lamp from the antique shop down the street. We took long walks in the morning. He told me he was proud of me, and I told him not to make me cry before breakfast. On my balcony, I have 4 planters now. Herbs, mostly, rosemary, thyme, a stubborn little basil that keeps threatening to die but hasn't. In the mornings, I make my coffee, in my coffee maker on my counter, and I take it out there and I sit with the early light coming over the building across the way, and I think about my husband, and I think about my mother, and I think about all the years I spent making room for everyone else. There is a shelf in my reading nook. I've started putting his books there, one by one, in the order he read them. Some of them still have his notes in the margins, little pencil marks, underlines, the occasional question mark next to a passage he wanted to think about more. Some evenings I sit in that nook and I read the pages he marked and I feel like we're still in conversation. I don't regret the apartment. I loved that home, but I love this one more because I chose it for myself, not out of obligation or sacrifice or the habit of making space. I chose it because the morning light comes in from the east and there's a nook for books and a balcony for growing things and a door I can open or close whenever I want. My daughter asked me recently if I was happy. I told her the truth. I said, I'm finally living in a home that remembers I live here too.